Parody, when done correctly, can be one of the sharpest, funniest ways to show your love for something. That task becomes a little bit easier when the target in your sights is a man who likes to dress up as a bat and be taken far more seriously than he has any right to. LEGO series developer TT Games is no stranger to this world, having jumped into Gotham on more than one occasion in the past and delivered consistently fun pastiches of some of pop culture's most beloved characters for 2 decades now. In LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight, it's back at the top of its game, built lovingly brick by brick with fun always foremost in mind, especially in an open world that eclipses its linear levels. A top tier LEGO game with playful twists on Rocksteady's Arkham series that hits the mark more often than not. It's a strong send up of the Caped Crusader, delivered with a kiss from a rose.
Men in tights. My favorite.
Legacy of the Dark Knight embraces its LEGO building blocks more than any other game in the series to date. By that I mean its overall structure is somewhat like if loads of LEGO Batman kits were thrown onto the floor and then reshaped into original creations of their own. TT Games has taken storylines from each of Bruce Wayne's big screen outings and crafted its own tale from those beloved scenes, just performed in plastic. For example, its first chapter slams together moments from Jack Nicholson's Joker Rebirth in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie with the Falcone-centered iceberg lounge infiltration of Matt Reeves' The Batman, and does so effortlessly with comedic charm. It's these deviations from the familiar film stories that often delight the most, and I enjoyed each time I thought I knew exactly what the twist on a certain scene was going to be, only to have a curveball thrown at me laced with delightful nonsense. Through a series of roughly 20 linear missions, you'll fight, puzzle and platform your way around Gotham locations in a way that will feel familiar if you played any LEGO games in the past. Where things are different though is in its combat, which takes a leaf out of Rocksteady's Batman Arkham series by introducing its counter and dodge based melee system, albeit with a comic book-esque chud, thud and whack. It feels slick to wield as you take on hordes of criminals and rack up combos reaching into the hundreds, pressing the parry button whenever a flashing prompt appears over one of their heads. I played on Caped Crusader difficulty, which is a step up from the classic LEGO experience, but in truth never came close to losing a fight. So yeah, I played on medium, and I know that TT Games aren't necessarily trying to pose a huge challenge here, but there is a Dark Knight difficulty option if you are looking for something to maybe test you a little bit more. Saying that, I would have liked to have been made to figure out how to approach combat encounters a little more though, with stealth takedowns coming all too easily and brawls not evolving much beyond the early hours. Most fights consist of dealing with multiple waves of basic grunts and the odd brute or ranged sharpshooter thrown into the mix as you roll and jump around a walled arena. Each member of the 7 character strong roster feels identical to control in basic combat too, with everyone from Nightwing to Jim Gordon packing the same punch. I would have welcomed a little more variety in their skill sets here in how they move around Gotham, as each is equipped with their own version of wings or gliders that all feel exactly the same. That grapple and launch into a long swoop does feel really good though, so it's hard to feel too aggrieved. Where they do differ though is in their gadgetry, with each member of the extended Bat family housing 2 distinct tools on their belt. Each playable character also has their own skill tree to explore, including some very fun unlockable ultimate abilities that can be unleashed once you've filled up your focus meter by landing successive hits. I'll admit to being initially worried about the relatively small number of playable heroes in Legacy of the Dark Knight working against it, especially when we've become accustomed to LEGO games having rosters stretching into the hundreds. But each character does have a substantial amount of depth to sink skill points into here to make them distinct from one another. Puzzles and not combat are where they show off these unique skills more than anywhere though. Each level is a great mix of problem solving and fighting, and although it never becomes truly brain teasing, it does make you pause for thought every now and then. Knowing when to switch between the 2 characters you're locked into playing as during a mission is half of the battle, as you work out if a pipe gushing chemicals can be stuffed up with sealant from Gordon's handy foam cannon, or a small vent can be crawled through by one of Selina Kyle's cat companions. Many bits of tech also come packed with their own enjoyable minigames, such as Batgirl's hacking batarangs, which trigger a short puzzle section where you need to avoid enemies in a maze made up of concentric circles. These minigames don't really develop in complexity over time, but there's a decent amount of different types, so you're never going going to be doing too many of the same in a row. After a stop-start prologue tutorial riffs on Batman Begins League of Shadows training in a way that takes far too long to get through the basics, it settles into a good rhythm and then really hits the heights late on. A highlight is a late riff on the Dark Knight's truck chase, which dynamically shifts the action from vehicle to on foot. I won't spoil it and show you it here, but trust me, it's one of the best bits of the game. It carries a sense of momentum that many of the missions prior to it lack, and I would have liked to have seen more like this when it came to mission design, because when it really sings, like in that sequence, it all comes together wonderfully. But the critical path has never been what I've enjoyed most when it comes to LEGO games. Instead, finding those offshoots and exploring the open world on the hunt for collectibles is really where Legacy of the Dark Knight comes alive.
I look forward to seeing how you do with a real challenge. Ta-ta!
There's no shortage of things to find in Gotham either. While this version of the crime-ravaged city isn't the largest, it's packed full of opportunity. From hundreds of skilled token-containing chests and villain-themed trophies to smash in each region, to more involved Riddler and Cluemaster conundrums to solve, it feels like there's something to do on every lofty rooftop and dingy alleyway. Then there are more involved chains of side missions to complete too, which often lead to encounters with Batman villains not involved in the main story. For example, I had a great time following the case of Waylon Jones, which tasked me with role-playing as the world's greatest detective and analysing compounds by matching up shapes to their corresponding atoms, or following trails using a UV light. Legacy of the Dark Knight loves keeping you busy without it ever feeling like busy work. Zooming around this open world Gotham is fantastic too, with each of the 30 vehicles feeling distinct from one another. I particularly enjoy the heft and weight of the tank-like tumbler from the Dark Knight, the perfect tool for smashing through the city's destructible decorations and scooping up the stud currency that erupts from them. After finishing all of the main story missions after 12 hours, I was still left with 53% of the collectibles checklist to find, and I can't wait to jump back in and uncover all that Gotham has for me. Rewards for completing these tasks are varied too, with certain outfits, vehicles and appearance modifying red bricks granted depending on the mission. Those ruining the smaller roster size will find comfort in knowing there are still 100 different uniforms to collect, ranging from comic book classics for the purists to the more maverick lime green toxic waste themed Batman ninja look if that's what your heart desires. As well as gaining these from completing levels, you can spend your hard-earned studs at one of Batmite's many stores dotted around the city. Like a Tom Nook who's shunned island life for the infinite cold and darkness of Gotham, he'll offer funny, meta-tinged quips while you browse his wares.
Enjoying the game so far? I don't know if you know, but where I'm from, Batman games are a pretty big deal.
Alongside costumes, he also sells decorations to place around your Batcave, granting a level of fantasy that Bat fans have never had before. There's charm overload at every turn, with cutscenes that are often hilarious as silliness is always prioritised through slapstick physical humour and goofy dialogue. And then there's the fact that you may just be wandering around the Batcave minding your own business when the Bat phone rings. Well, that would be Bane, gloriously voiced by What We Do in the Shadows' Matt Berry, who loves nothing more than to crank call you with some wonderfully childish messages.
Knock knock, who's there? Bane! Gotham's reckoning.
Time for the big finish, Gordon.
LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight is a lovingly made, often hilarious take on Batman's movie and game history alike. It remixes classic moments from almost every film with deeper cuts from the Caped Crusaders comic book beginnings too. A largely successful attempt at sophisticating LEGO combat that suffers a bit from repetitive one-note encounter design, combined with a good mixture of puzzles, powers its homage-laden levels. But its open-world Gotham is where it truly comes to life, generously packing its gothic surroundings with hundreds of collectibles and pockets of opportunity. It might not tell a story that will sit alongside Batman's best overall, but it delivers a fantastic plastic parody of his greatest hits.
Reviews director Tom Marks here with Simon Cardy to talk a little bit more about his tastes in the LEGO space, the Batman space, all that sort of stuff. Cardy, you've done platformer reviews for us before, like Astrobot, that sort of thing, but I want to dig into your history specifically with the LEGO series. So like, how long have you been playing these games? Do you try to hit every single one? What do you like about the series, all that?
I've been playing them since the very beginning that they were making this style of LEGO game. So I think it might have been 2005, and I was 13 in 2005, and I distinctly remember getting the first LEGO Star Wars game as soon as it came out, and I fell in love with them since then. Kind of like that slapstick humor, that parody of the films, but also just these kind of collectathon games, which I've always enjoyed. And I feel like we get less and less of them these days. So I've always been a fan of the Lego games. I wouldn't say I've played them all. I used to go through a phase where I'd play everyone that came out, but they came so much more frequent. And sometimes they'd hit some like movie licenses or stuff I wasn't as interested in. But like, I think Lego Marvel Superheroes back in 2013, that is still the peak for me. I just loved the open world and just the sheer number of characters. It was kind of like getting to when the MCU was getting up to its peak as well. So I was involved in all of that. But also that year, you also had Lego City Undercover, which I think is just an underplayed game to this day. Their take on the GTA sort of crime open world, and I absolutely loved that game. And then, yeah, I'd kind of now slot the Legacy of the Dark Knight in that top tier with those other two, I think. I don't know. I haven't really got to a point where I'd rank those in any order. But yeah, I've been a Lego fan for a long time, and this one is getting back to that top tier of Lego game, I think.
What is it about the series that you think they have to really nail to speak to you? Is it the parody part of it? Is it this huge amount of characters? Is it the actual action, collecting, platforming? What is the most important piece of that formula?
The most important piece, I think, is at this point giving me something a bit new from a Lego game that I haven't played before. Because, like I said, there've been collectathon kind of games for a while, the Lego games, and this one is to like a big extent. You know, there's hundreds of things collected in this open world Gotham, but I feel like this is as good open world as they've done maybe since Marvel Superheroes. I love this open world Gotham. Let's be honest, it's very much based on the Rocksteady Arkham series, and it's kind of a Lego version of that. I kind of did go into this game thinking you need a big roster of characters, but this proves the point that you don't really. You can have those 7 characters and they can have different skill sets, and that means you don't need to collect character tokens throughout the world to unlock. They've pared down that skill set to these 7 core characters, and you still unlock outfits for them, but they've proven their point that you don't need a roster that huge. I do think parody is a huge part of these games. Like the slapstick comedy you get from the Lego games is a huge part of it. And they're looking at these movies they've looked at before and these characters and having to tell new jokes. And I think they've done it really successfully. And they really have nailed the comedy this time, I think, and really merged some more sophisticated gameplay ideas, which maybe Lego games in the past have kind of shunned. They experimented with the Skywalker Saga as a more third-person shooter game, but this time that incorporation of a slightly watered down Arkham melee combat system, I think really works this time around.
Well, let's talk about the other side of that coin then, which is the Batman games and the Arkham games, because this game is, like you said, taking from both pools. It's mixing. It's very obviously inspired by the Arkham series in a lot of ways. So what's your history there? Because you reviewed Suicide Squad for us, gave it a 5, I believe, back then. But you've, of course, played more Batman games than just Suicide Squad.
The Arkham trilogy and Arkham Origins are kind of some of my favorite games I've ever played, especially, and I know it's maybe not the most popular opinion, but Arkham Knight is actually my favorite of all of them. I feel like maybe we give those tank missions more weight in that discussion than they should. They're only a tiny part of that game, but I think the story that Arkham Knight tells is the best of all of them. And still to this day, I'm not sure I've played many more interesting open worlds. I know like the streets aren't bustling, they give their reasons for that narratively, but the emergent events that happen in that open world, like the Man-Bat is the one that everyone always cites, but I do think ever since then I've wanted more games to take that approach to open worlds. Just things can happen out of nowhere, and I know it's hard to do, but like I think Arkham Knight especially really nailed that open world formula, and it is kind of sad we haven't had another one since. Like you said, Suicide Squad, I had my hopes for, in the end wasn't what I wanted at all from Rocksteady, and you know, I dream that one day we get to go back to that world, but we'll see.
All right, last question. Is there any sort of series or anything that you think still needs to be Lego-fied?
Oh, there's so much. I mean, just off the top of my head right now, I'm thinking, they have the sets. Where are we getting the Simpsons one? Where's Lego Simpsons Hit and Run, essentially? Surely that is something that everyone would want to play. I know the Simpsons aren't at their peak anymore, but people our sort of age, Tom, you know, grew up on the Simpsons, and I would play the hell out of some sort of Simpsons open world game. Give me that.
That's a good answer. Cardy, thank you so much for chatting with us a little bit more about your tastes here. If you want another review from Cardy and another conversation at the end of it, you just gave Mixtape a 10. And so we had a long chat at the end about that, about, how you think about scores and all that sort of stuff there. And if you want a different sort of co-op, platformy fun game from earlier this year, the Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Bros. Wonder came out, which had some extra content, and we reviewed that as well. And for everything else, stick with IGN.